Thank you very much. Yeah. I need to make a little disclaimer to begin. A couple years ago, I had an injury to my vocal cords, and so my voice is unreliable. And I apologize if in the course of this presentation I get hoarse. Let's look first. Okay, better? Okay. The credits I've listed here, number of sources for the information and the images that are in this presentation. We're going to be talking about Harvey Eastman and his spearheading the effort to build the railroad bridge which became the Walkway. How many of you have heard or know something about Harvey Eastman already? One, not that many, and I'm not surprised. A lot of local residents do not know who he was, and even though he was a major influence on this community. Some of the things that people have said about him that knew him: he hit Poughkeepsie like an exploding meteorite. He had flashing blue eyes and the head of a genius. And he literally gave his life for his adopted city. If you go to the Poughkeepsie Rural Cemetery, you can see his large granite monument. He's buried there with his family. And there's a bronze shield with his face image on that. Well, who was he? Born in Marshall, Oneida County, New York, October 16th, 1832. As a young boy, he grew up on a farm. But apparently, he showed some talents in other areas, and at the age of 19, he traveled to Rochester, where his uncle was running a college of business, and this was a defining chapter that would shape the trajectory of his career. His uncle, George Washington Eastman, headed a school in Rochester where he taught young men penmanship and basic clerical skills. His son, George Jr., who was Harvey's younger cousin, went on to achieve great fame, international fame, as the founder of the Eastman Kodak Company. Harvey swiftly advanced from being a pupil in his uncle's college and a mere helper to becoming the standout teacher. Eventually, Harvey decided to venture out on his own, and he established a school in Oswego. And he had a very innovative approach to teaching, emphasizing hands-on learning through a practical experience. And this quickly gained popularity, and being eager to expand his audience, he set up another school in St. Louis. Unfortunately, he had some members of his faculty and visiting speakers who were advancing the anti-slavery point of view, and that quickly escalated into a confrontation with the St. Louis authorities, and he had to skedaddle. He had to get out of there quickly. So he hit Poughkeepsie like a meteorite, an exploding meteorite. Excuse me. He had heard great things about Poughkeepsie and its strategic location on the Hudson River, nestled between New York City and Albany. The story is that he happened to meet Matthew Vassar on a train trip, and Vassar encouraged him to come to Poughkeepsie and set up a school there. So Poughkeepsie, known as an educational hub with numerous private schools of various sizes, the city was also a prominent industrial and commercial center. And despite never having visited this place, Eastman selected Poughkeepsie as the ideal location for his new venture, the State and National Business College. His brilliance soon became apparent as he launched an extensive advertising campaign. Now, he hasn't seen Poughkeepsie, hasn't set foot in Poughkeepsie at this point. He's touting the endless opportunities awaiting those who enrolled in his college. And the response was overwhelming. Letters poured into the small Garden Street post office. The postmaster was overwhelmed by the influx of mail addressed to Eastman, and it's reported that he said, "Who is this Eastman anyway? All these letters are taking up space meant for regular mail." Well, finally, November 16th, 1859, Harvey Gridley Eastman, 27-year-old entrepreneur, arrived in Poughkeepsie for the first time to collect his mail. From that day on, Poughkeepsie was forever changed by the arrival of Eastman and his innovative vision. Here we have a cover of a catalog that he sent out, Eastman National Business College. Look at those beautiful buildings that are touted on the cover of the catalog and also inside the information. Different departments housed in different buildings. Wow, that looks great, doesn't it? Well, the truth is, in reality, there were no college buildings or dormitories at that time. Eastman simply rented rooms as needed for his classes and arranged for students to board in local homes. Some of the rooms rented by Eastman were located in various buildings. Some of these buildings still exist, such as the Cannon Street Methodist Church, which became the Masonic Temple and is now the location for Dark Side Records, I believe. The church at the corner of Vassar and Mill Street, the Washington Street Methodist Church, that was raised when the arterials were put in. City Hall, the Collingwood Opera House, which today is the Bardavon, and the McLean Building. The images used in his advertising were engravings, not photographs, and that allowed the artist to take creative liberties with the size and the appearance of the buildings, adding trees and grass to create the illusion of a beautiful campus. It's no surprise that many arriving students were shocked to find no campus, no dormitories, only scattered buildings along cobblestone and muddy streets. Despite the initial disappointment, there's no record of any prospective student returning home after the first visit. In a sense, Eastman could deliver the goods. He didn't have buildings that looked like a college, but his instruction was phenomenal. So many have praised Eastman for being ahead of his time as a promoter, even though some of his methods may have been seen as misleading. Ultimately, his strategies proved to be effective. It's understandable that many local residents, many local businessmen considered Eastman a flim-flam man, a con artist. But even though his advertising was misleading, what his instruction proved to be phenomenally effective. As a matter of fact, within 3 years, he had 500 students. Within just 5 years, there were over 1,700 students, and for many years, around 2,000 students attended the college year-round. Every anniversary of the founding of the college was celebrated by a grand parade, and here we have an artist's depiction of the grand parade of the Eastman College students parading through the streets of Poughkeepsie, and there leading the whole group in his very flamboyant attire is Harvey Eastman mounted on his white horse.
Is that also misleading?
Yeah. His explosive success was based on two key factors: his incredible, flamboyant promotional skills and his ability to identify a growing need in the market. Indeed, at that time, colleges and universities did not offer business courses, too mundane for their curricula. Instead, they concentrated on courses like Latin, Greek, and the classical literature. However, with the end of the Civil War and thousands of men looking for gainful employment, plus the Industrial Revolution rolling into high gear across the country, the new industries and commercial houses were crying for trained accountants, business administrators, and Harvey Eastman would supply them. He made contact with all the big department stores, and he had an arrangement with Wanamaker's in Philadelphia that he would send down at least a dozen of his graduates every year to work for Wanamaker's department store. Indeed, as his advertising so eloquently promised, graduates of Eastman Business College were showered with employment opportunities. Also, Eastman's theme of learning by doing was ahead of its time. For example, his students gained experience in banking by working in the college bank. They printed their own monopoly money, their own play money, and conducted banking. And they later had a direct telephone line to Wall Street. And there was a college post office. They had their own stamps and the money orders. And here's some examples of Eastman money. I understand that there's still a lot of this floating around. In addition to these hands-on experiences, students also had the opportunity to work in an emporium where they sold actual goods, and they had an insurance agency and a shipping company. They were responsible for completing various forms, duplicates of those used in real business world, and handling money transactions with precision. And here we have a photograph of a group of would-be bankers, and I was particularly interested in this photograph because of the gentleman, the young gentleman standing on the far right. I believe that is Tim Woodruff, who later became Lieutenant Governor of New York State. And you'll notice in front of him is a young lady. There were a few female students, not many, and that is either a female student or Mr. Woodruff's future wife. I don't know which, but I'm pretty certain that is Timothy Woodruff. And by the time a student graduated, they were well equipped to enter the workforce without the need for lengthy orientation, having already mastered every task involved. All the printing was done at the college, and this unique approach to education not only equipped students with skills, but also instilled in them a strong work ethic and a sense of responsibility. Eastman would have a number of prominent speakers come and talk to the students at his college, public invited, and these were like real pep talks for the students. The college operated year-round with the exception of Thanksgiving Day and Christmas. Students had the flexibility to begin at any time. The basic curriculum spanned 3 months, priced at $100, which included tuition, textbooks, as well as room and board. I understand that that Eastman paid local residents $3.50 per month to house the students. And this was a boon for many of the families here, which would take in 3 or 4 of the Eastman students. One thing that I was very interested in, an important course that Eastman taught was penmanship, ornamental penmanship. And at this time, most secretaries were male, and instead of typing correspondence, they were expected to be able to write it out in this beautiful, elegant penmanship. And here is a photograph of the penmanship class. Looks to me like that maybe 40 students there. Well attended. This is basically the alphabet that was taught. I'm sure you've seen this alphabet used on elegant engraved invitations. If you were to get an invitation to attend an event at the White House, you would get an invitation that was lettered in this style. And as I was introduced, I'm an artist, and I teach this style of penmanship. So one of my points of interest in Eastman's College. My great claim to fame, I wrote the book Calligraphy for Dummies, which includes all the techniques and the how-to of this alphabet. Here's an example of Eastman's writing. Be just and fear not. H.G. Eastman, 1864. As flamboyant as his personality. It took me a long while to figure out the H and the G. It's all so looped and scrambled together. Do you see it? Beautiful. Yeah. It requires a lot of practice and skill to be able to do that. Something about Eastman's family. His wife, Minerva Eastman, really worked side by side with him at the college. She would entertain guests, and if students were ill, she would provide a sick room or sick area for them and would nurse them back to health in their home. Eastman had 2 daughters, Cora Eastman, and Cora later married Timothy Woodruff, who became a successful banker and lieutenant governor of New York State. Second daughter, Carlotta, they called her Lottie. She married an engineer who was working on this bridge. Not a happy or successful marriage. They did have a couple children, but her passion in life was dogs. Their home, located at the corner of South Market, or what's called South Road, and Montgomery Street. Their beautiful mansion was located there. And the grounds around their home were the beautiful Eastman Park. And here's a postcard showing the entrance to Eastman Park, the beautiful walking path, and the flowers and beautiful trees and so forth, and his home. Another example of Eastman Park, very popular place. And the map layout, which shows that there was a small lake or pond on the property, which in the winter became a skating rink. There was also a fountain, and there was also a zoo, a small zoo on the property. One of the lasting monuments was the Soldiers' Fountain. Eastman thought it was important that Poughkeepsie have a monument commemorating soldiers, and he floated a bond to have a fountain built, and did not receive a lot of response, so he paid for the whole thing himself. Obviously, his business college was very, very successful. He became extremely wealthy. This fountain still exists today. This was actually a recent photograph. On the south edge of Eastman Park is a series of brownstone apartments, Eastman Terrace. This was an unsuccessful real estate venture that Eastman attempted. He wanted to make Poughkeepsie a little New York City with its own Central Park and its own apartments and so on. He promoted his college, but he also promoted the city. Today, really about the only evidence of Eastman Park are these marble pillars which mark the opening of the entrance to Eastman Park at the corner of South Road and Montgomery Street. His popularity among the people soared, leading to his election as mayor of the city in 1871. And one of his top priorities after taking office was addressing the recurring epidemics that had plagued the city, including typhoid fever, smallpox, and diphtheria. Poughkeepsie was called a sick city. To tackle this pressing issue, the new mayor enlisted the expertise of a renowned engineer to construct a state-of-the-art water purification plant. This plant, the first sand filtration facility in the United States, was built on land now owned by Marist College. By 1872, a network of water pipes had been installed throughout the city, and Poughkeepsie became renowned for the quality of its water. Under Mayor Eastman's leadership, significant improvements were made to the city's infrastructure. In addition to a new water filtration plant, numerous city streets were paved, miles of sidewalks were installed, additional street lighting was added. The city trolley system of horse-drawn cars was expanded, and water and sewer pipes were laid throughout the city. These enhancements not only improved the overall appearance of the city, but also increased the quality of life for its residents. But his biggest and by far most challenging project was the construction of the railroad bridge across the Hudson. And here we have an artist's idea of what that bridge might look like, connecting Poughkeepsie with the West Bank and all the industry west of here, and to be a major conduit or artery for the commercial movement of goods and products back east and west. The idea of a railroad bridge crossing the river at Poughkeepsie had been discussed even before Harvey Eastman arrived on the scene, but it took his vision and his energy and persuasiveness to make it a reality. This was a published cartoon of the proposed bridge, another artist's idea. The purpose here was to raise money. Notice that on the top level there are railroad trains that are crossing, and there's a second level where it's a pedestrian walkway. He was pretty successful in raising this money. And another published cartoon shows him sitting on the cornerstone. Apparently, from what I've read, the hat that he's wearing in this cartoon was typical for him, that he had this broad-brimmed hat that he would wear. There's a little poem there. This is the spot, and here will rest the grand chain link twixt east and west. The noblest bridge yet built by man will from yonder ridge old Hudson span. At the time, this would be the largest bridge in the world. The world at large will here pay toll. Coal, cotton, iron, down east will roll, and Yankee notions, large and small, will soon roll back and pay for all. This was from the Poughkeepsie Eagle News, the report of the laying of the cornerstone. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, November 11th, 1873. Mayor Eastman led a ceremony which officially laid the cornerstone for the new railroad bridge. Thousands of people assembled for the cornerstone laying in spite of the weather. Strong wind blew sleet and snow in the faces of the spectators. Several hundred people in many wagons. Good question. I would love to know. I've looked for it, but maybe when the bridge was eventually built, that first cornerstone may have been removed. I don't know. Does anyone? Yeah, that is an excellent question. I'm glad you asked it, because I was hoping, well, maybe somebody here will know the answer to that.
For cleanups under the bridge, we've looked and never found it.
Never found it, yeah. So there was big ceremony, and afterwards there were speakers, and there was a banquet at the Opera House, and then there were fireworks. Incredible. The bridge project faced opposition from riverboat operators who feared it would harm their business of transporting goods across the river, and additionally, a number of local leaders were unhappy with Eastman's extravagant style and his willingness to put Poughkeepsie into debt. And you can imagine, this guy comes from who knows where, never been to Poughkeepsie before, and starts this business and wants to make all these changes, and he appears to be just like the guy in The Music Man. He's a con artist. Doesn't have any buildings. He just rents a room here and a room there. So there were he had his local adversaries. And he spent a lot of money. Despite the criticism, Eastman persevered, not stopping me, and successfully ran for the seat in the state legislature. Now, he was mayor at the same time, won that seat, and his main objective was to secure all the necessary funding and pass a bill authorizing construction of the bridge. And after obtaining the required approvals and the funding, Eastman was elected to a third term as mayor and to oversee the construction of the bridge. However, the project encountered a series of unfortunate setbacks, huge setbacks. Shortly after construction began, the third pier of the bridge collapsed into the river. Subsequently, the construction company went bankrupt, leaving the unfinished pier standing in the river for 9 years. This failure was a source of embarrassment for those who had invested in the project, particularly Mayor Eastman, who had worked tirelessly to get the bridge started. and it became known as Eastman's Monument and Eastman's Folly. Despite these challenges, new funding was secured and construction resumed, and it was finally completed in 1888, 10 years after Eastman's premature death in his mid-40s from tuberculosis. The bridge opened for rail traffic January 1, 1889. Indeed, Eastman passed away unexpectedly, tuberculosis. He had a deep appreciation for Poughkeepsie, his adopted city. He dedicated himself to enhancing the beauty and the livability of the city, and he often proclaimed that although he may not have been a native of Poughkeepsie, he was undoubtedly a champion for Poughkeepsie. Despite the common occurrence of premature deaths in the 19th century, people assumed that H.G. would defy the odds, but he passed away. And here is a part of a lengthy article that appeared in the New York Times about Mayor Eastman's passing and the ceremony and all the buildings draped in black bunting and the large procession that headed out to the cemetery. During his brief 18-year tenure in Poughkeepsie, he accomplished many tasks. High energy, flamboyant personality, and he still managed to connect personally with everyone he encountered, including young children, and this made him incredibly popular and severely missed when he passed away suddenly. In addition to overseeing every aspect of the college and leading the construction of the railroad bridge, Eastman, as mayor, took on numerous other significant projects. One of the negative points is, with his passing, he left the city severely in debt, and indeed the city went bankrupt, but eventually recovered. A few years after his passing, an actual building was built, which was located on Washington Street, down this way, but when the arterials were put in, that area, that location is now part of the roadway. The building itself was actually raised in 1941. When colleges started teaching business courses, there was no longer this need for Eastman's college, and even though the college had run a successful almost 75 years, the reality was that it was no longer marketable, and the college closed in 1933. Someone suggested that there should have been a sign placed over the college door proclaiming Eastman's gift to the young unmarried women of Poughkeepsie. This was a way that the young ladies could find a husband who was going to be quite successful in business. 74 years in operation. Graduated over 100,000 students coming from almost every state and many foreign countries. Most successful graduate was S.S. Kresge, who started the Kresge dime stores, which eventually grew into Kmart. His legacy and vision. There are two monuments to his vision that we have today. I mentioned the Soldier's Fountain, and here the Walkway. Eastman appreciated life, or he approached life with immense enthusiasm, always envisioning the endless possibilities that the future held. He was a visionary, but he was also a man who took action to make his dreams a reality. He realized that beauty is essential in establishing an appealing environment for both work and living within this community. And additionally, he recognized that economic prosperity hinges on attracting external investments into a community. Schools can play a vital role in achieving that objective. His vision encompasses an enthusiasm for life, and I think we can all adopt that point of view. A dreamer and a person of action. He recognized that beauty is essential to a good life and that we should attract external investments into our community. We can still learn from that. Now, would that mean that maybe we should start a school? Well, right now, online schools are the thing, and there are a lot of people making good money at that. But more than starting a school, I think today we can all be bridge builders, bridging the gaps that exist within our society, racial gaps, political gaps, so forth. So I encourage you to take a little bit of Eastman's vision home with you and put it into work. So I thank you. But that's not all. That's not quite all. I did bring some of my books with me. The Poughkeepsie Mystery, where Eastman is a central figure in this story, and I already have one gentleman here. It's a thrilling tale. I set out to write something about the history of Poughkeepsie and the Walkway, and when I started writing, I felt like, oh, this is beginning to sound just like a school history book, and I didn't want that. So I packaged the history inside a fictional story, which is a mystery thriller. And I also more recently have published a collection of metaphysical essays. If you want to look at that, I have copies of those books with me, and also invite you to visit my website. Here I am with some examples of work that I've exhibited, and the address is benicelli.com. So